What if the greatest treasure in your life wasn't gold, fame, or fortune, but something buried deep inside yourself? In a quiet village, nestled beneath a silent mountain, there lived a man so lazy, he didn't even lift a finger to eat, unless the food was placed directly in his hand. While others worked under the scorching sun and blistered their hands in the fields, he lay under the same tree every day napping, dreaming, wasting time. But one day, everything changed. A mysterious monk appeared with a promise that seemed almost too good to be true. Behind that mountain lies a cave, and inside that cave is a diamond so precious it could make you rich forever. What followed wasn't just a journey across rough terrain. It was a battle against laziness, self-doubt, and comfort. And by the time the young man returned, he wasn't the same person anymore. This is the story of how one lie revealed a truth more valuable than any jewel. And the diamond he thought he wanted wasn't the diamond he truly found. Stay till the end, because what he discovered you might already have too, at the foot of a sleeping mountain, where the breeze hummed through tall grass and birds sang. In rhythm with the rustling leaves, there sat a small, humble village. It was a peaceful place, simple homes made of clay and stone, narrow winding paths, and fields that stretched wide into the horizon. Life here was not easy, but it was honest. People worked hard. The farmers rose with the sun, women tended too, the homes and livestock, and children fetched water from wells that were often half a mile away. But amid all this effort and energy lived a young man who seemed untouched by the rhythm of life. He was known across the village not for his strength or skill, but for something entirely different: his unshakable laziness. While men with sunburnt necks harvested grain and women stitched clothes by candlelight, this young man, barely in his 20s, would lie under the same banyan tree every single day, his arms behind his head, one leg lazily bent, and eyes half shut in an eternal daydream. He didn't plow, he didn't sow, he didn't hunt, gather, build, or clean. He didn't even pretend to help. He just existed. Some say he had potential: a strong body, a sharp face, even a spark of wit when he chose to speak. But it was all wasted. He'd rather dream of riches falling from the sky than lift a finger to earn them. The villagers gave him names, some teasing, some bitter. They called him Sooraj, but not after the sun. They joked that he was like the sun, at night completely useless when needed. Children whispered that he might have been cursed by the gods to be born with bones made of butter. Old men shook their heads and muttered, "He'll never change." Not until life slaps him awake. But Sooraj didn't care. In fact, he had perfected the art of not caring. Whenever someone scolded him for being idle, he would yawn dramatically and say, "Why break your back when the world is already spinning without you?" That was his attitude. Passive, detached, bored. Every now and then, he would walk into the village square just long enough to grab food or beg for leftover rotis, and then return to his sacred spot beneath the tree. That banyan had become his throne. From there, he watched the world move without ever moving with it. It wasn't that Sooraj didn't know how to work. He had simply convinced himself that life was better when nothing was expected of him. He hated the idea of effort. Struggle annoyed him. Sweat made him angry. He saw labor as a punishment, not a pathway. And the worst part, deep down, a part of him knew he was wasting away. But even that knowledge wasn't enough to stir action. Because comfort, when consumed daily, becomes a poison that numbs your sense of urgency. And that's exactly what had happened to Sooraj. But life has a strange way of shaking even the most stubborn souls. And that moment was coming. One afternoon, while the rest of the village was busy, men plowing their lands, women drying spices, and children chasing goat, Sooraj, as usual, lay beneath his tree, his shirt slightly torn, his hair unkempt, staring at the clouds above. That's when he saw a figure walking slowly into the village from the east. The figure was cloaked in orange, holding a wooden staff, bold with calm eyes and a long, serene face. It was a wandering monk, a traveler, a man of wisdom who sought no home and carried nothing but a bowl and silence. He passed through the village like a soft wind, asking for nothing more than simple food. The villagers welcomed him, offered rice and lentils, and bowed respectfully. But what struck the monk the most was Sooraj, because every time he visited, which became more frequent over the next few weeks, he would always find Sooraj in the exact same position, under the same tree, with the same expression. At first, the monk said nothing. He only observed. He asked about the boy, and the villagers laughed. That one, he's like a rock. Been lying there since birth, I think. But on the 5th day, something in the monk stirred. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps compassion. He walked up to Sooraj and stood silently beside him. The young man, eyes half open, noticed the shadow over his face. "What now?" he muttered. "You want something?" The monk smiled softly. "I've seen you here many times. Do you ever do anything?" Sooraj rolled his eyes. "Why should I? The earth feeds me. The tree shades me. What more do I need?" The monk didn't argue. He only asked, "Have you ever worked in the fields?" "Fields?" Theft, Sooraj snorted. "Too much pain. My back hurts just thinking about it." The monk paused. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "Do you want to become rich?" Sooraj sat up, something he hadn't done in a while, and looked at the monk with the first sign of interest anyone had seen on his face in months. "Rich, as in gold, land, jewels?" The monk nodded. "Something even better. A diamond one that can make you rich forever." Sooraj blinked. He sat fully upright now, brushing dirt off his shirt. "You serious? Where?" The monk pointed to the towering mountain behind the village. "Behind that mountain is a hidden cave, and inside that cave lies a precious diamond. If you can find it, it will change your life." For a moment, silence wrapped around them. Sooraj looked at the mountain, then back at the monk. "But that mountain, it's huge, it's dangerous. And the cave, how far is it?" The monk shrugged. "Far enough that only the determined will reach it. But if it's too hard for you, you can stay here." And with that, the monk began to walk away. But something strange happened in that moment. Something Sooraj couldn't explain. His body leaned forward, his voice hesitant but alive, called out, "Wait, I'll go. Just tell me, are you telling the truth?" The monk smiled again, a knowing smile. "You'll find out." And, just like that, Sooraj's life of stillness was about to end. Because the journey had begun, and what he was about to discover would be more valuable than any diamond. The mountain behind the village had always been there, towering, silent, ancient. It loomed like a sleeping giant draped in clouds, watching the villagers from a distance, yet rarely acknowledged. No one climbed it, no one dared. Its jagged edges and thick forests made it seem impenetrable, more myth than mountain. But today, Sooraj didn't see it as just a background to his lazy afternoons. He stared at it with unfamiliar curiosity, stirred by what the monk had said. A diamond, behind that mountain. It echoed in his mind like a whisper he couldn't shake. The monk had disappeared into the village after their conversation, taking only a small bowl of rice and vanishing into the shadows of an alley. But Sooraj remained rooted in place, still under his tree, still wearing the same dusty shirt, but different. Something inside had shifted. For the first time in his life, he wanted something. Not comfort, not sleep, not escape from work, but something more. And that thought alone both excited and frightened him. By evening, he found himself wandering the village aimlessly, something he rarely did. His feet moved, but his mind raced with questions. Was the monk lying? Why tell him, of all people, about a treasure? Was it a test, a joke, or something real? That night, Sooraj didn't sleep under his tree. Instead, he lay awake, staring at the stars. What if the monk was right? What if this was his only chance? What if he never found out Tan someone else did? The thought burned like a small fire inside him. The next morning, he did something that shocked the entire village. He stood up, really stood up. Not for food, not for stretching, but with intention. And then he asked for help, not favors, but information. Which way leads to the back of the mountain? He asked a startled goat herder. The man blinked. Why? I'm going to the cave, Sooraj said simply. Whispers spread like wildfire. He's finally gone mad. Did someone curse him? Maybe he saw a dream. But Sooraj didn't care what they said. His focus was locked. He found the monk again, seated near a small temple at the edge of the village, his eyes closed, lost in meditation. Sooraj sat down across from him, sweating, anxious, determined. You said there's a diamond behind the mountain. The monk opened one eye slowly. Yes, you said it's real. The monk nodded. Very real. But the path is not easy. Many would turn back. Sooraj frowned. How far is the cave? It's not the distance you should fear, the monk replied, but the man. You are when the path gets hard. Sooraj looked confused. What does that mean? The monk's voice remained calm. You have lived a life without resistance. But resistance builds strength. Pain shapes clarity. Without struggle, there is no growth. If you truly want the diamond, you must change. You must become someone new. Not for me, for yourself. That sentence hung in the air like incense. Sooraj nodded slowly. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. The desire had taken root. He asked for directions. The monk gave them. But just before Sooraj left, the monk added something peculiar. Do not expect the journey to be fair, or obvious, or kind. The mountain has a way of showing you yourself. That puzzled Sooraj, but he was too excited to ask for clarity. With nothing but a small sack of food, a flask of water, and the clothes on his back, he set off at sunrise. For once, he wasn't running away from discomfort, he was walking straight into it. The path at first was manageable dirt roads, grassy slopes, shaded areas beneath overhanging trees. He felt energized, proud. He imagined himself returning, with a shining gem, laughing in the faces of those who mocked him. But soon, the terrain changed. The air grew thinner, the ground steeper. Thorns clawed at his legs. Rocks slipped beneath his feet. He stumbled more than once. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his lips dry, his muscles screaming. Every few minutes, he thought of turning back. It's too far. What if it's a lie? Who climbs a mountain for a maybe? But then he'd hear the monk's voice in his head. The mountain will show you yourself. That single line pushed him forward. For the first time in his life, he was in pain and he wasn't quitting. He didn't know how far the cave was. There were no signs, no trails, no certainty. Just the idea of the diamond and the stubborn belief that he had to find it. On the third day, he reached a small ledge near the peak. The air was crisp. The village below looked like a speck of dust. Sooraj stood there, gasping, trembling, filthy and sore. But something flickered in his chest. It wasn't greed. It wasn't pride. It was a strange feeling of power. He had climbed a mountain. He, who once couldn't walk to the village well without complaining, had conquered something massive. He smiled for the first time in days, not because he was at the top, but because he knew he had come this far alone, unaided and unstoppable. And now came the descent. Sooraj stood on the ledge, breathless and broken, the wind whispering in his ears like a ghost. Below him, the forest carpeted the valley like a sea of green waves. Behind him, the mountain he had conquered rose tall and merciless. And ahead, hidden within the shadow of a cliff, was the cave. It looked ordinary, small, uneventful. The mouth of it was dark, damp, and still. But in Sooraj's mind, it wasn't. Just a cavern was a vault of destiny. Every bruise on his legs, every tear in his shirt, every drop of sweat that had stung his eyes, it all led to this. He stepped closer, heart racing, hands shaking. This is it. This is where everything changes. He dropped his bag at the entrance and ducked inside. The air inside was cold, quiet, almost sacred. His footsteps echoed off the walls. The light from the entrance faded quickly, and darkness swallowed everything ahead. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of cloth he'd wrapped around. A burning twig, his makeshift torch. It flickered, throwing shadows across the jagged walls. He moved deeper inside. The silence grew thicker. Every sound of gravel underfoot felt like thunder in that void. Then he saw it, an empty chamber. Stone walls, a hollow, lifeless echo. No diamond, no treasure, nothing, just emptiness. At first, he blinked, certain he must have missed something. He checked behind rocks. He scraped at the floor with his fingers. He even looked up at the ceiling, half hoping a gem was dangling from above like a fruit. But it was all in vain. The cave was completely empty. A strange, burning feeling crept up his chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fatigue. It was rage. He had been lied to. That monk, that old man with calm eyes and clever words, he had sent him on a wild, cruel chase. The bruises on his legs now felt heavier. The scratches on his arms stung more. His hunger returned like a hammer to the gut. He sat down, right there in the middle of the cave, and screamed. Not because the cave was empty, but because he had believed. He had dared to hope, to try, to change, and for what? Nothing. For the first time in days, doubt crawled back into his mind like a snake slithering through cracks. "You're a fool," it hissed. "You should have never left your tree. You were never meant to climb mountains." He felt the weight of every painful step he had taken up that trail. It wasn't just the body that hurt now, it was the soul. And then the worst thought of all crept in: I have to go back. He had made it this far on the promise of treasure. But now that promise was gone, and the return journey even harder, even longer, and with nothing to look forward to. He sat at the mouth of the cave for what felt like hours, watching the sky, turned from blue to golden, then to deep purple. He thought about staying, maybe building a small shelter, maybe never going back at all. What was the point? He had nothing in the village but shame. But then, a cold gust blew through the rocks, and suddenly, the cave didn't feel sacred anymore. It felt like a grave. A voice echoed inside his mind. Not the monk's this time, his own. If I stay here, I'll rot. And just like that, something inside him clicked. A survival instinct. A flicker of strength that hadn't existed before this journey. He stood up, wiped the dust off his hands, and without looking back at the cave, began the descent. The climb down the mountain was nothing like the climb up. Now, every step was laced with bitterness. Every stone seemed sharper, every branch more twisted. He stumbled more, fell harder. There was no excitement, now just a slow, punishing march back into the world he had left. But something strange was happening. Despite the disappointment, he didn't stop. Despite the pain, he didn't quit. Even as hunger gnawed at him and his lips cracked under the dry wind, he kept moving. Because now, he wasn't being pulled by a promise. He was being pushed by something else entirely, resolve. When he finally saw the rooftops of the village in the distance, his legs gave out. But not because they were weak, because he realized he had done it. He had gone farther than he ever believed possible. He had climbed, fallen, risen, and returned. And in that return, he had become someone else. As he limped through the village, people turned to stare. The same lazy boy who once mocked work was now covered in dirt, sweat, and blood, but walking tall. He didn't head for his tree. He walked straight to the temple. And there, sitting just as he had days ago, was the monk. Eyes closed, unbothered, as if he'd been waiting. Sooraj stood before him, breathing heavily, chest burning. "You lied to me," he said, voice raw but steady. The monk opened his eyes, slowly, calmly. "Did I?" "There was no diamond," Sooraj said bitterly. "Just an empty cave." The monk nodded. "I never said the diamond was in your hands." He tapped Sooraj's chest gently. "I said it would make you rich forever." Sooraj frowned. "I don't understand." The monk smiled, that same quiet, knowing smile. "But you do. You just haven't said it yet." Silence fell between them. And then, slowly, like dawn breaking over the mountain, Sooraj understood. He remembered the way he pushed past his limits. The courage he found on that mountain. The strength he didn't know he had. And for the first time in his life, he said it aloud. "I did something I never thought I could." The monk nodded. "And that, my friend, is the true diamond." Sooraj had expected the climb to be hard, but he hadn't expected the descent to be worse. When he had climbed the mountain, he was driven by hope, by greed, by the wild dream of a diamond that would change his life overnight. But now, as he turned away from the empty cave and looked down the steep slope that led home, there was no dream pulling him forward, only gravity and grit. Every step downhill tested his balance. His knees trembled, his ankles twisted, his shoulders ached under the weight of disappointment. And worse than the physical pain was the voice in his head. "You fool. Why did you believe him? You traded comfort for wounds. And for what?" He gritted his teeth. There was no point answering. That voice that belonged to the old version of himself. The version who had wasted years under the banyan tree. The version who had chosen sleep over struggle, apathy over ambition. He wasn't that man anymore. He couldn't be. not after what he had done, but it didn't make the journey easier. On the second day of descent, a rock slipped beneath his foot, and he crashed hard onto the ground. A sharp pain tore through his leg. He screamed into the sky, but no one answered. No one even heard. He was alone. He sat there for a long time, breathing through the pain, his palms scraped raw, his eyes burning with dirt and tears. That moment, broken, bleeding, and furious, could have been the end. He could have given up, let the wilderness take him. But he didn't, because deep down, beneath the anger and the exhaustion, there was a new fire burning inside him. It wasn't pride, it wasn't even desire. It was something purer, something unbreakable, the will to finish what he started. He stood again, one leg dragging slightly, but still moving. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt, tied it around his knee, and kept walking. And as he walked, something unexpected happened. He stopped thinking about the diamond, stopped thinking about the monk, stopped thinking about how much he hated climbing. He began thinking about himself, not the self he used to be, not the boy who had wasted months lying in the shade, but the self he was becoming. He thought of the moment he reached the top of the mountain, the breathtaking view that had stunned him into silence. He thought of how it felt to breathe air so pure it made his lungs ache. He thought of how many times he had wanted to turn back but didn't. For the first time in his life, Sooraj respected himself, and that respect was worth more than any diamond. The forest was silent most nights, but tonight it felt almost alive. The leaves whispered above him. The earth felt warm beneath his tired body, and the stars, millions of them, watched. Without judgment, he didn't cry, he didn't complain. He just lay there, staring up at the night sky, breathing. He thought of the villagers, of how they would laugh when he returned. He thought of the children who used to mimic his lazy walk for fun. He thought of the old men who had given up on him years ago, and then he smiled, not because he planned to prove them wrong, but because, for once, their opinions didn't matter. He knew who he was now. He wasn't the treasure hunter anymore. He wasn't the dreamer. He was the climber, the survivor, the man who showed up when it hurt. On the fourth day, he reached the base of the mountain. His lips were cracked. His legs were bruised. His stomach was hollow. But his eyes, they were different, sharper, brighter, alive. As he stepped back into the village, silence fell. The chatter stopped. The tools in the fields rested. Everyone turned to look. They saw the dirt. They saw the cuts. But more than anything, they saw something that no one had seen in Sooraj before. Strength. The same villagers who once mocked him now stared in quiet disbelief. He didn't wave, didn't explain, didn't boast. He just walked, straight toward the temple. And there, as if time had never moved, the monk sat beneath a neem tree, eyes closed, breathing slow, waiting. Sooraj approached and stood before him. His voice was hoarse, his body weak, but his presence solid as stone. "I went," he said, "just like you said." The monk opened his eyes and smiled gently. "I know, there was no diamond," Sooraj continued. "I searched, I bled, I nearly died, and there was nothing." The monk nodded slowly. "I never said you would find a diamond in the cave." Sooraj's jaw clenched. "Then why send me?" The monk looked into his eyes not with pity, but with pride. "Because you needed to find the one that was buried inside you." Didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, almost like a confession, I hated you for lying to me." "I know," the monk said softly. "That hate helped you keep walking." Sooraj looked down at his hands, scratched, strong, no longer soft. "I don't feel lazy anymore," he admitted. "I feel ready." The monk nodded. "You've uncovered the truth. Most people die never realizing." "What truth?" Sooraj asked. The monk leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "That the greatest treasure you'll ever own is the version of yourself that shows up when everything hurts and you still keep going." Sooraj didn't go back to his tree. He didn't even glance at it. The once sacred banyan that had shaded his idleness, protected his excuses, and cradled his wasted time was now just a tree, a symbol of who he used to be. And that man no longer lived here. Instead, he walked straight to the fields. The same fields he had mocked. The same soil he once refused to touch. The same land that, for years, he believed was beneath him. Now, he stepped into it like a man stepping into purpose. His bare feet sank slightly into the earth, the soil, cool and grainy beneath his heels. In the distance, a few farmers paused mid-swing of their sickles, staring in disbelief. One of them, the oldest, with a white beard and a deep tan narrowed his eyes. "So, the prince returns," he muttered. Sooraj didn't react. He walked up to an abandoned patch of land near the edge of the fields, one that had been ignored for seasons because the soil there was too dry, too rocky, too difficult to till. Perfect. No one offered him tools. No one welcomed him. No one believed he would last more than a day. But that was fine. He didn't come back for applause. He came back to prove something to himself. He borrowed a rusted hoe from an old storage shed, found an unused water drum, and began working. The first strike of metal into the hard earth shocked his arms. The second sent a jolt up his spine. By the 10th swing, his hands were blistered. By the 20th, blood was trickling down his palm. But he kept going, because now pain didn't scare him. Discomfort didn't stop him. He had walked through worse. He had bled in silence. He had screamed in darkness and gotten back up without an audience. So this was nothing. The sun rose higher. Sweat poured down his face. His shirt clung to his back. His knees trembled. But the rhythm of his work became a kind of music. Dig, breathe, pour water, repeat. As the days passed, whispers began to travel. "Have you seen him? He's still out there." Every morning, before sunrise, some came to mock, others came to watch. But no one dared help, not yet, because the villagers weren't cruel, they were cautious. They had seen men change for a day. They had seen apologies melt in the heat of habit. They had seen lazy hands pretend to toil for show. But what they hadn't seen was consistency, and that's exactly what Sooraj gave them. Every day, every swing, every breath. He didn't speak much, didn't try to win anyone's approval. He just worked. One morning, as the village roosters crowed and the sky turned pale gold, the monk walked past the edge of the fields. He paused, his eyes scanning the line of workers, until he saw him, Sooraj, covered in dust, back bent, hands moving with rhythm and grace. The monk smiled. He didn't approach. He didn't say a word. He just stood still, watching the seed of a lesson bloom into something extraordinary. Because Sooraj wasn't just farming now. He was planting discipline, watering worth, and harvesting something far more valuable than crops' dignity. But the truth was, not everyone was happy. Jealousy, like weeds, grows fastest in places where change threatens the old order. One evening, a group of young boys who used to laugh at Sooraj while he slept approached him. "You really think working in dirt makes you special now?" one of them asked. Sooraj didn't flinch. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and said calmly, "No, it doesn't make me special. It makes me real." They didn't know how to respond. Because what do you say to a man who's not pretending anymore? Weeks passed, then months, and one day, something happened that hadn't happened in years. An old woman, wrinkled and bent from time, with a cane carved from rosewoods, near Sooraj's field, watching him silently. He noticed her, paused, and walked over. She looked up at him with eyes that had once held disappointment. "You remind me of your father," she said softly. Sooraj swallowed hard. He had never spoken much of his father. A man known for his strength, for building irrigation lines across the village, for feeding the poor during droughts. A man Sooraj had once hoped to become but never believed he could. He would have been proud, she said, and then slowly walked away. Those words, simple and weightless, hit Sooraj harder than any stone. Because deep down, even after everything, a part of him had still wondered if he was enough. Now he knew. One evening, the same monk returned to the village square. This time, not to meditate, not to preach, but to speak. A small crowd gathered. He stood in front of them, palms folded, and said, "There are two kinds of riches in this world. One that fills your pockets, and one that fills your life with meaning." He turned to look at Sooraj, who stood quietly near the back. "The first kind can be lost, stolen, or wasted. But the second is earned every day through effort, honesty, and purpose." The villagers turned to Sooraj, finally, seeing him not as a joke, not as a failure, but as something rare. A man who had met himself on a mountain and came back a stranger to his own past. A single drop of rain means little, but if it keeps falling steadily, consistently, it softens even the hardest ground. And that's what Sooraj became in his village. A quiet, steady force, not loud, not boastful, just present, just real. Every morning, the same rhythm. Before the sun had a chance to stretch its light across the rooftops, he was already in the fields, digging, planting, watering, turning dry earth into something green and alive. People noticed, at first in silence, then in whispers. A boy who once couldn't carry a bucket of water without complaining was now moving stones to build irrigation lines. A boy who mocked workers was now toiling with them from sunrise to dusk. A boy who slept under trees was now planting them. But the real miracle wasn't what he was doing. It was what he was becoming, and what others began to believe they could become, too. The first person to join him was unexpected. His name was Ravi, a potter's son, who had dropped out of school and spent most of his time gambling near the riverbank. He used to laugh the loudest when Sooraj walked by with his shovel and cracked hands. But one morning, he showed up. "Need help with that water trench?" he mumbled, not meeting Sooraj's eyes. Sooraj simply nodded and handed him a second hoe. No lecture, no questions, no pride. And that's how it started. At first, Ravi came once a week, then every other day, then daily. Within a month, they were digging together at dawn, speaking less and sweating more. Then came Meera, the weaver's daughter, who'd long stopped believing change was possible for herself or anyone else. She had dreams once. She wanted to open a small market for handmade goods. But life had stolen those dreams from her slowly. Day by day, watching Sooraj from her window, she saw not just hard work, but transformation. One afternoon, she walked into the field with a sack of seeds. "You need someone to help plant?" she asked, with a half smile. Sooraj nodded. Again no speeches, only silent respect. Soon, others followed. The old farmer with a bad knee, who hadn't worked in years, the young boy whose father left, and who now saw in Sooraj a different kind of role model. The group of women who used to gossip under the well-end now gathered near the fields to pack grain, braid ropes, share laughter and labor. Something had shifted in the village, not all at once, not loudly, but steadily like roots growing beneath the soil. One evening, the village elders held a meeting under the banyan tree, the same tree where Sooraj once slept. But this time, he didn't lie beneath it. He stood beside it, facing the crowd. People listened, not because he demanded attention, but because he had earned it. An elder cleared his throat. "We've been watching you." Sooraj remained quiet. The elder continued, "We mocked you once. We doubted you. Some of us still do. But one thing we cannot deny is that this village is changing. And it started with you." Sooraj didn't smile. He didn't bask in it. He simply said, "I didn't change the village. I changed myself." The rest followed. What began as one man's redemption had become a ripple across the community. Young boys stopped skipping work. Old tools were cleaned and put to use again. Abandoned plots were reclaimed. A broken irrigation channel was rebuilt by 20 volunteers in a single day. And for the first time in years, the harvest came early. The village hadn't just produced crops, it had produced hope. One day, the monk returned again. He walked through the village slowly, his robe catching dust, his hands folded. He stopped near Sooraj's field, now green and blooming. Sooraj, wiping sweat from his brow, looked up and gave him a small nod. The monk smiled. "You turned rocks into roots," he said. "I just worked," Sooraj replied, humble as ever. The monk stepped closer. "No, you believed. In the pain, in the journey, in the lesson hidden behind failure." He looked around at the other villagers, now working beside Sooraj. "You see what you've done?" he asked. Sooraj shook his head. "I didn't plan any of this." "You didn't have to," the monk said. "You became the proof that change is possible. That laziness isn't a curse, it's a choice. And that choice can be reversed." But not everyone saw the change as inspiring. A few villagers still whispered, "He's just putting on a show," or "Let's see how long this lasts." But the fields didn't lie. The food on their tables didn't lie. The peace in their homes didn't lie. Change doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with calloused hands, sore backs, and people waking up a little earlier than they did the day before. Sooraj had given them that, without speeches, without sermons, just by showing up every day and staying when it was hard. One night, Mira stood beside him, looking out at the crops swaying under moonlight. "I never thought this land could look like this again," she whispered. Sooraj said nothing, but deep down, he knew. It wasn't just the land that had healed, it was the people. And it started with a lie about a diamond. A lie that turned out to be the greatest truth he'd ever lived. Years passed, seasons came and went. The mountain still stood tall at the edge of the village, its peak hidden in clouds, untouched, unbothered. But something else had changed forever. The boy who once lay under the banyan tree. Sooraj was no longer called lazy, no longer whispered about with pity or disdain. Now he was called something else. The diamond farmer, not because he found wealth, not because he owned land, but because he became the treasure everyone thought could only be discovered in a cave. It started with a child. One morning, as Sooraj watered the fields, a boy barefoot, with dust on his cheeks, stood at the edge of the plot, watching quietly. "Can I help?" he asked. Sooraj looked up, surprised. "You want to work?" The boy nodded. "I want to be like you." Sooraj chuckled softly. "Why would you want that?" The boy tilted his head. "Because you found the diamond." Sooraj paused, his hands muddy, his clothes stained by the land he had come to love. He looked into the child's eyes and saw something powerful belief, not in the diamond of stone, but in the diamond of spirit. And so he handed the boy a small trowel and said, "Then let's start digging." From that day on, Sooraj became more than a farmer. He became a teacher, a guide, a living symbol of what change looked like when it was earned, not handed. Every week, more young boys and girls showed up at the field gates. Some carried tools, others carried questions, all carried hope. Sooraj taught them how to plant seeds, but more than that, he taught them how to build habits, how to fight the enemy inside the one who whispers, "You're not strong enough," the one who says, "Maybe tomorrow," the one who once lived. Inside him, soon, nearby villagers began to hear of him. People came, not to see the mountain or the monk, but to meet the man who had changed the way an entire village thought about work, purpose, and life. A merchant from a neighboring town asked him to speak at a gathering. Sooraj declined. "I'm not a speaker," he said. But the man insisted, "You don't need fancy words. You've lived the truth. Just share that." And so, for the first time, Sooraj stood before a crowd of people sitting on woven mats under a canopy of stars. He didn't speak like a leader. He didn't raise his voice. He just told the story of a boy who chased a lie and found something better than truth. And when he finished, there was silence, not because they were confused, but because they understood. One day, the monk returned, older now, slower in step, but his eyes still carried the calm of someone who had seen the world from both mountaintop and valley. Sooraj met him at the same spot where they had first spoken beneath the banyan tree. The monk sat, just as before, and looked at him. "You've become what I hoped you would," he said quietly. Sooraj bowed slightly. "You lied to me, and I thank you for it every day." The monk smiled. "I didn't lie, I just pointed you toward yourself." There was a pause. Then Sooraj asked, "Why me? Why choose me for that lesson?" The monk looked at him with a gleam in his eye. "Because you were the most asleep, and the ones who sleep the deepest often awaken the strongest." The fields bloomed year after year. The children grew. The village thrived. And Sooraj, he never stopped working, even as his hair grayed, even as his body grew slower. He still rose before the sun and returned home after it set. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because this wasn't punishment. This was his calling. Then, one winter morning, as frost laced the edges of the fields, a group of young villagers found a small note pinned to the trunk of the old banyan tree. It was written in Sooraj's hand. "The mountain never gave me a diamond, but it gave me a mirror. I climbed it, expecting treasure, and discovered the treasure was the one climbing. If you are looking for greatness, you won't find it in caves or gold. You'll find it in sweat, in pain, in persistence, in the small choice to rise each morning and try again. I was once nothing but a shadow beneath a tree, and now I am the light that wakes the village. Don't wait for a monk to challenge you. Don't wait for a lie to push you. Start walking, start failing, start becoming. The diamond is not in the mountain, it's in you. They never saw Sooraj again after that winter. Some say he went to another village to teach. Others say he climbed the mountain again, this time not for a diamond, but for peace. But those who knew him best didn't need to see him to feel him. His presence lingered in the early morning songs of farmers, in the hands of the children planting saplings with quiet pride, in the voices of the old telling stories not of riches or kings, but of a lazy boy who became a legend. So, the next time you feel tired, unworthy, stuck in a cycle of maybe later, remember this: you don't need a monk to give you purpose. You don't need a mountain to prove your strength. You don't even need a diamond to become valuable. You only need to begin, to take one honest step, to face one difficult day, to believe just once that you were made for more. Because sometimes, the treasure you seek isn't buried in the world. It's buried in your will. And when you finally choose to dig deep enough, you'll realize you were the diamond all along. Let's pause for a moment. Close your eyes. Forget the village. Forget the monk. Forget the mountain. Now, think of yourself. Where are you in this story? Maybe you're still lying under the tree, making excuses, saying, "Not today, maybe someday. I don't have the energy, I'm not like the others." Or maybe you've already started the climb, struggling, stumbling, hurting, but still moving. Maybe you've reached the cave, and like Sooraj, you found nothing. No diamond, no reward, just silence and bruises and the bitter taste of disappointment. And you're wondering, was all that effort for this? But what if I told you, you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Because in this life, the cave isn't the reward. The climb is. The reward isn't waiting at the end. It's being forged inside you, in every drop of sweat, every hard choice, every moment you decide not to quit. Think about this. Sooraj didn't return with gold. He returned with grit. He didn't find a diamond. He became one. And the people who once mocked him, they followed him. Not because he shouted louder, but because his actions spoke truth. Because transformation doesn't need a microphone, it just needs consistency. Now, let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly challenged yourself? Not for praise, not for a grade, not for Instagram, but for you. When was the last time you woke up earlier than needed, pushed harder than expected, chose discomfort over ease just to see who you could become? We live in a world that sells shortcuts, quick money, easy fame, hacks for success, but deep down, we all know the truth. There is no shortcut to self-respect. You cannot fake it. You cannot borrow it. You cannot buy it. You earn it. The same way Sooraj earned it, by doing what your past self avoided. By showing up especially when you don't feel like it. By proving, through action, that you're no longer the person who hides under shade, waiting for life to change itself. Let's be honest, most people don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they quit before they discovered how strong they could be. They give up on the 98th step of a 100-step climb because the pain feels louder than the purpose. But here's the twist. The pain, that's the proof. It means you're moving. It means you're trying. And it means you're closer than you think. So, if you're watching this right now, wondering whether you can actually change your life. Let me tell you something, Sooraj learned the hard way. Yes, you can, but no one's coming to do it for you. No monk, no mentor, no miracle. The only person who can climb that mountain is you. And it won't be pretty. It won't be easy. It won't always make sense. But when you return, wiser, stronger, whole, you'll realize the reward isn't what you found. It's who you became along the way. So here's your choice. Do you want to stay under the tree comfortable, numb, untouched by effort? Or do you want to start climbing? The first step won't be impressive. The world won't notice, but you will, and that's what matters. Because once you begin, you become dangerous. To your laziness, to your old identity, to every excuse you've ever used to stay small. You become someone unstoppable, not because you never fail, but because failure doesn't define you anymore. It builds you. Remember what the monk said. You were the most asleep, and the ones who sleep the deepest often awaken the strongest. Maybe you've been asleep. Maybe you've wasted time. Maybe you failed 100 times before. So what? Wake up now. Try again. Climb anyway. Because greatness doesn't come to the perfect. It comes to the persistent. And in a world full of people chasing shortcuts, be the one who chooses the mountain. Be the one who chooses work over waiting. Be the one who turns failure into fire. One last thing. If Sooraj could do it, a boy who once slept through life, then why not you? There is no difference between him and you. Only one thing: decision. He decided to walk. He decided to suffer. He decided to become. And now, it's your turn. Close this video and take one step. One tiny, honest step. And if you don't know where to start with this. Clean your space. Wake up an hour earlier. Finish the thing you keep putting off. Move your body. Drink water. Read something that strengthens your soul. Small things, repeated daily. That's how diamonds are formed. Not in caves, but in pressure. And you, my friend, you are under pressure for a reason. So shine. Bleed if you must. Stumble if you will, but climb. Because the world doesn't need another follower. It needs you. Awake, alive, on fire, becoming what you were born to be. The diamond, it was never out there. It was always you.